I work nights for campus facilities, door checks, boiler readings, light audits, quiet chores that make you feel like the last person left awake. In October, the parking lots pick up a winter taste, metal on your tongue, wet leaves underfoot, breath turning white. I always start at Building C because its time card reader is the most temperamental on the route. Gray box, green backlight, 2 soft bell tones when it registers your badge. It's precise to the second, and that used to make me feel safe. At 11:58 p.m., I pulled into the far space and killed the engine. No wind. Maple leaves stuck to the asphalt like dark fish. I walked the edge of the lot because habit says avoid the middle. Too exposed, too bright. The reader's display was dim until I was an arm's length away. I tapped my badge, beep, and the screen flashed in 23:58. Clean. Basement first. The boilers shivered on a steady line just above 60, the needle twitching like a nervous eye. I wrote stable by hand because the app freezes in cold. I listened to the building's breath, the thin hiss of vents, the dull hunger of the return air. I like empty buildings. I like knowing what each sound means. It's when you can name a sound that your heart starts to act like it wants out. At 12:07, I was back on the ground floor. The corridor smelled like hot dust and something colder than that, like freezer air when you open the door and decide to shut it again. I brushed the push bar on the staff exit. Solid. Chain in place. When I stepped outside, the night felt newer, as if something had just finished happening and the air hadn't settled back. I glanced at the reader the way you check a sleeping baby, just to be sure. There, under in 23:58, was a second line. Out 0006. I stared hard enough to feel the numbers behind my eyes. Then I opened the log. The system showed my credential at this device at 0006, reading out. I'd been in the basement at 0006, writing the word stable. I looked down at my sleeve where a smear of dark grease made a comma near the cuff. The camera above the door. A black dome on a pole so rusted it looks like it's bleeding. Stores footage to our maintenance tablet. I rewound to 0.06. Fog drifted under the light at 12:05:58. At 12:06, a figure stepped from that fog and approached the reader with my walk. Right foot a little sideways, from an old roofing nail through the sole. Left shoulder hunched from last winter's fall. The figure tapped a badge. The reader pulsed green. Out 0006. The figure turned enough for the camera to catch the sleeve stain. Same shape, same comma. Then stepped backward into the fog and was gone. I tried to clock out just to shake the feeling. The reader gave a low error, already out, like I'd been caught stealing my own time. Leaves whispered in the lot. Not the sharp scurry of a raccoon, not the twitch of a sparrow. This was heavier, paced a half beat behind the rhythm of my steps. I turned too fast and the world swam. Empty. The dumpsters crouched like dull teeth. A leaf bag rolled 6 inches and stopped like a breath held too long. Facilities, be advised. The radio crackled. Duplicate credential detected at C. Static fizzed at the edges. Badge office says impossible. Check the device. Before I could answer, the interior chime rang. 2 soft notes, a muffled doorbell. But the sound comes only when the door opens from the inside. The chain was still bolted. The metal was cold against my ear. Through it I heard a private noise I know too well. My key ring brushing my jacket zipper. I did the rounds again, floor to floor. Like motion could keep the strange at bay. On 2, a paper snowflake stirred, where it had been taped wrong to a window, turning like a compass that couldn't pick north. On 3, the motion sensor lights blinked when I stood perfectly still and wouldn't go off when I walked away. In the basement, the cheap wall clock, slow since August, coughed its minute hand forward, stopped, corrected itself. At 12:24, I tried the reader once more. Already out. I took a photo to have proof a morning brain couldn't argue with. In the plastic around the display, my own face reflected weakly. Over my shoulder, a second reflection hung where a person would stand to read their name, fogging the surface with a breath I could not hear. I started showing up earlier, 11:57, 11:53. The night I came at 11:49, shoe prints crossed the lot at a diagonal. My boots have a nick on the right heel and a patch of flattened tread under the ball of the left foot. The prints had both. They began at the low chain link, where no one walks, and ended where I usually stand, angled the way I angle. There were no prints walking away. A week before Halloween, something spoke over my radio in my own, chest-cold voice. Copy. Already out. I hadn't pressed to transmit. The red light glowed anyway, then died. Now I park one space farther. I knock the reader with my knuckles to feel the cold, to prove I'm here. On quiet nights, I catch myself twice in the plastic. One me where I stand, one a little closer than I'd ever lean, cheek almost to the screen, as if reading ahead. I don't check the log at the 06 anymore. The system always decides who is in and who is out. I fear the night it decides there was never room for both. I drive the town's leaf truck, not one of the new green machines you see on city websites, but the old kind that rattles like it's coughing itself apart. We call them beasts because that's what they sound like. Metal lungs, rusted teeth, always hungry. My route is K12. 2 cul-de-sacs, a dead-end stretch of Birch Lane, and one house that everyone at the yard calls the Grave Route. You'll know why soon enough. Birch Lane is the kind of place where everything looks neat, but feels off. Lawns cut low, wreaths on doors even in summer, curtains always drawn halfway. The air there tastes different in October. Metallic, wet, like you can smell frost before it happens. And at the very end of the lane stands number 127, a pale blue house, 2 stories, siding flaking like old paint off a doll. The porch has a rocking chair that's always tilted forward, as if someone just stood up from it. No one ever turns on the lights. The mailbox still has a nameplate, but the letters peeled away long ago, leaving only faint scars where a family name used to be. Every pickup day there are 7 brown paper leaf bags waiting at the curb, always 7, numbered in black marker, 1 through 7, each perfectly sealed and standing straight, never soggy, never ripped, even after rain. The first time I noticed that, I figured some neighbor was helping out, trying to keep the place tidy. But someone would have seen them doing it, right? It's a small town. People notice things here. And yet, year after year, those bags keep showing up. The records at the county office say 127 Birch Lane has been vacant since 2012. No water bill, no electric usage, no tax payments. It should have been condemned by now, but it isn't. It just sits there, quiet, wrong, and patient. That night, the sky looked bruised. Orange light faded behind the hills, and a heavy fog was sliding between the trees. My partner Jim rode with me, half asleep, drinking cold coffee. Dispatch had flipped our route that day. We were supposed to start with 127 instead of finishing there. Jim joked about saving the haunted house for dessert, but rules are rules, and we hit it first. The truck idled hard, shaking under us. The streetlight above the house buzzed faintly and flickered like a candle about to give up. And there they were, 7 brown bags lined up neatly at the curb, shining faintly in the wet air. I stepped down, and the gravel under my boots crunched like bones. Bag number 1 felt heavier than it should. Leaves don't usually weigh that much. It had a centered weight, something round pressing against the paper from the inside. When I lifted it, whatever was inside shifted slowly, like it was rolling to find balance. I told myself it was a clump of wet mulch. I tossed it into the hose chute and hit the pedal. The impeller groaned as the bag disappeared. The hose shuddered like it didn't want to swallow. And then it did. For a second, it sounded like something scraped along the metal walls inside. Then, silence. Bag number 2 was damp on the outside, but warm to the touch. The paper stuck slightly to my gloves. When I tightened my grip, I felt something soft beneath the paper, like hair. I dropped it and stepped back. Jim yelled over the engine to feed it, so I did. The hose sucked it down, and a faint whisper came up through the ductwork. It wasn't the wind. It was one drawn-out sound that almost formed a word before breaking apart. Jim didn't seem to hear it. He laughed and said it was probably a mouse nest. Bag 3 rattled faintly, like hollow things knocking together. Acorns, I thought. Or maybe those little seed pods. When I threw it in, the hose pitched a lower note, then settled. Bag 4 was lighter, but when I lifted it, the bottom seam split just a little and brushed my palm. It left a thin red line, as if a thorn had kissed me. I checked for glass or twigs, but there was nothing sharp. The air around us changed by the time I reached bag 5. It got colder. Not the kind of cold that creeps slowly, but the kind that drops like a curtain. Even the exhaust fog from the truck thickened and hung in place. Jim started humming under his breath, the way he always does when he's nervous. The porch chair creaked once, no wind. I stopped moving. The chair creaked again, forward, and then stayed still. It wasn't the slow sway of wind. It was the creak of wood adjusting under a weight. Jim didn't look up. He said, "Man, come on. It's just the air shifting." But the trees behind the house weren't moving at all. Every branch was still. Bag 6 was different. Whoever tied it had used new twine, tighter than the rest. The number was written slanted, like someone wrote it while walking or with their hand shaking. When I dragged it closer to the truck, I caught a smell I can't forget. Old flowers, dust, and something underneath. Faint but sharp, like rot just before it turns sweet. When the hose caught the bag, the engine fought it. The chute vibrated hard enough to shake my hands. Then it went silent all at once. The sound cut clean, and the smell vanished. Only one bag left. Number 7. Heavier than all the rest combined. The ink looked fresh, wet enough to smear. I crouched beside it. My finger came away black. Behind me, the chair creaked again, just once, and a woman's voice floated out. Calm, almost kind. She said, "Only 7. Only ever 7. I froze. It sounded close enough that I could feel the breath of it near my ear. I looked up at the porch, but there was no one there. The air hung still. Jim didn't notice a thing. He was inside the cab tapping on the dashboard to some song I couldn't hear. I swallowed and lifted the last bag. When it hit the hose, the sound changed completely. It wasn't the rustle of leaves or the hiss of air. It was something dragging, slow and wet, catching on the metal before giving way. Jim didn't say a word this time. He just watched until it disappeared at the next stop sign. I glanced in the mirror. The porch was empty, the chair still, but something about the shadows didn't feel finished. The radio cracked with static. Then dispatch's voice came through. K-12, confirm pickup count for 127 Birch Lane. Jim said, 7, like always. There was a pause. Then the dispatcher replied, copy that. Courtesy sweep only. Property's been vacant since 2012. Jim laughed nervously. Guess the ghosts rake their own yard. I didn't laugh. Back at the yard, we parked the truck under the sodium lights. Inside my mailbox at the desk was a single folded piece of paper, not typed, handwritten in fountain pen ink. It read, you took more than you should. Leave 6 next time. No signature. Just a small, crooked number 7 in the bottom corner. We don't get handwritten notes. Everything's digital. I showed it to the foreman. He frowned and said, someone must be pulling a prank. He crumpled it and threw it in recycling. But the smell of that old ink stayed on my fingers long after. The next week, I drove the route again. This time, there were only 6 bags at the curb, perfectly lined up, numbered 1 through 6. But there was another bag, half hidden under the maple tree where the grass dips. No number on it. The paper darker, heavier. I left it alone. When I finished, I found something caught under the wiper blade, a folded newspaper clipping. The headline read, Family of 7 lost in fall accident, 6 recovered. The paper was yellowed, soft, and smelled faintly of dirt. I didn't tell Jim about it. Halloween week, the house finally had a light, a low lamp glow behind the curtain, steady and warm, like someone was home again. We picked up 6 bags. The 7th still sat under the maple. As we drove away, that porch light turned off by itself, as though it had waited for us to leave. At the yard, when the impeller ran to clear the chute, it made a sound I hadn't heard before, like a sigh pressed through wet cloth. It almost formed a word. Jim wouldn't listen. He said engines make weird noises. But that sound didn't come from metal. It came from something deeper. Now, every time I pass Birch Lane, I count. Sometimes there are 6 bags, sometimes 7, and once there were 8, but only for a night. When I slowed to look, the porch chair creaked forward and stopped. The next morning, there were 7 again. The county finally fenced the property. People said kids had been sneaking in, but the bags still show up, even through snow, even when the truck routes are closed for the season. Jim quit last spring, said he couldn't handle the smell in the chute anymore, old flowers and rot. I'm alone on the route now. I try not to stop by 127 unless I have to, but sometimes, even on other streets, I'll glance in the mirror and see a brown paper bag sitting at the curb, numbered in thick black ink. Sometimes it's just 1 bag. Sometimes there are more. Last week, I found a note on my dashboard. The same handwriting, same ink. It said, you took too many again. I don't open the chute anymore after dark. I keep my gloves in a sealed box because no matter how much I scrub them, I still feel that soft air under the paper, still smell that old perfume. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind dies and the world goes still, I swear I can hear that same calm voice right beside my ear, warm and near, whisper, only 7, only ever 7. I don't go near Miller's Field anymore, not because of what happened, but because of what didn't stop happening after. There's a kind of silence that sticks to you, Not the kind that makes you feel peaceful, but the kind that feels like the world's holding its breath, waiting for you to mess up again. Back then, Miller's Field was just our hangout spot, a long rectangle of damp grass and fog at the edge of town, fenced off since the county said it was unsafe. The old railroad trestle cuts across the far side, half collapsed, half forgotten. We used to sneak out there on Halloween weekends, light a fire, tell stories, drink cheap beer. The field had a pull to it, quiet, empty, far from everything that could find us. That year, the last year, it was me, my cousin Mark, his friend Casey, and Lena. We promised it would be the final time. The county had started installing trail cams to catch trespassers. They'd fine you, and lately those fines were personal. Photos, names, mailed warnings. But the risk made it feel worth it. So yeah, we told ourselves it was goodbye, our last bonfire. We parked by the gate around 9. The fog was already sitting low, thick enough that the world beyond 10 feet looked smudged. The air smelled like wet cedar and old smoke. That mix you only get in late October. Mark lugged the wood, Casey carried the gas can, Lena held the thermos, and I brought my phone, mostly to take photos, maybe even check the trail cam app, just to see if the county had caught us. We built the pile in the middle of the clearing, half logs, half broken boards. By 9:10, it caught. The fire came alive like it had been waiting for us. Flames licked through the fog, throwing light that felt heavier than it should. We sat in a rough circle, laughing, talking about the same things we always did. Old jobs, small town gossip, who was still around, and who had finally left. Out beyond the flames, the field stretched dark, and at the far edge where the trestle disappeared into fog, 3 little green lights blinked. The trail cams. Watching. Waiting. They were supposed to stay green until motion triggered them. Then they'd turn red. At 9:14, all 3 turned red at the same time. We froze. No wind. No sound. Just those little red dots burning through the mist, like eyes. I pulled up the app. Yeah, the county had this live camera feed anyone could see, mostly so people could help report vandalism. 3 thumbnails came up right away, our fire from 3 angles. Then there was a 4th feed, the one facing down the trestle. It was black. I figured maybe the lens was dirty or fogged up, but at 9:21, that screen flickered. For a second, it was static. Then the image sharpened. It showed the fire, our fire, from ground level, like someone had set the camera right in the flames, and around the ring were 4 people, us. But there was a 5th figure, standing just outside the circle, where the fog started to thicken. Tall, wool collar turned up, face lost in shadow. Mark leaned over my shoulder. Glitch, he said, reflection or something. But when I rewound the feed, that 5th shape wasn't there at 9:10. At 9:12, it appeared, faint, half a step into view. At 9:14, closer. By 9:21, it was standing just at the edge of our warmth, and every frame made it look more aware. The fire popped. Lena flinched and tried to break the tension. "To not paying fines," she said, raising her cup. Casey threw a pine cone into the flames. It burst with a sharp crack. And then, under the sound of the fire, something exhaled from the direction of the trestle. A long, low breath. Not wind, not human. Like a train sighing after decades of sleep. The fire leaned toward it, flames stretching forward, then snapping back. The fog at our feet slid the opposite way, like the ground itself was tilting. I tried to sound casual. "Pack it up," I said. We didn't argue. We stomped at the coals, doused what we could. At 9:27, my phone buzzed again. Another app notification. The thumbnail showed our car at the gate, lights on, rear window glowing red from the taillights. We were already inside, and in the middle of the back seat, a fifth figure sat between Mark and Lena. Same wool collar, head turned slightly toward the camera. The timestamp read 21:27. Now. Nobody said a word. I just started the engine. As we pulled away, the camera's dots blinked out one by one, like eyes closing. No green reset lights. Just gone. At the gate, my brakes squealed. Same sound they always made when I ignored maintenance too long. My phone buzzed again. Same thumbnail, but sharper, cleaner. Like someone had wiped the lens for a better shot. I locked the screen and shoved the phone in my pocket. Halfway to town, Casey spoke. "You smell that?" I did. Cedar resin, and something cold underneath it, like wet stone. We passed a deer standing in the fog. A big buck. It didn't move, didn't blink, just watched us with those still black eyes, breath curling like ropes in the cold. The kind of look that makes you wonder which one of you is real. Nobody spoke again. By the next morning, the county posted that the trail cams at Miller's Field had been vandalized. All SD cards corrupted, they said. We hadn't touched them. I checked the app anyway. 3 dead feeds. And a fourth, the trestle camera, showing a diagonal gray streak across the screen, like a shoulder or a collar. A week later, I vacuumed the car. In the crease of the middle back seat, 2 cedar needles pressed flat and shiny. My jacket had the same kind stuck in the shoulder seam. I told myself it was from that night, brushing against the pile of firewood. I told myself a lot of things that made sense out loud. Lena stopped replying to messages for a while. When she finally did, she just said, "I keep hearing the sound of breathing when the heater's on." Mark moved to Portland within a month. Casey posted on Instagram a picture of fog and the caption, "Never again." I didn't comment. In November, fog settles low in town, down at knee height. On those mornings, you can see your reflection in the bakery windows, faint, double-layered from the glass. Sometimes, when I pass by, there's a fifth outline walking behind us. Always half a step back, always with its head tilted just enough to catch the light. I don't take pictures anymore. I don't check the app. And when Halloween comes around and someone posts a bonfire photo, I scroll past, because if the photo shows 4 people and my brain quietly counts 5, I'd rather not know which one's real. People think horror is something that runs at you from the trees, but fall teaches you different. It's what stands very still at the edge of your warmth and waits for you to be done.